The story of the happiest brand in the world begins ironically with a tragedy. It is 1886, Atlanta, Georgia, a city trying to rebuild itself from the ashes of the Civil War. In a small home laboratory, a man is fighting his own demons. John Stith Pemberton is not a businessman. He is a pharmacist, a war veteran, and most importantly for our story, a morphine addict. Gravely wounded in battle, Pemberton was desperately seeking a cure, an elixir that could ease his pain without the slavery of opiates. In a three-legged brass kettle in his backyard, Pemberton mixed a dark decoction: cola nut extract, coca leaves, sugar, and essential oils. On May 8, 1886, he carried a jug of this thick syrup to Jacob's Pharmacy in the city center. There, by accident or destiny, the syrup was mixed with carbonated water instead of still water. Customers who tried it rated it simply as excellent. It sold for 5 cents a glass. But Pemberton, the alchemist, lacked the vision to sell his creation. That role would fall to his bookkeeper, Frank Robinson. It was Robinson who, looking at the main ingredients, suggested the name. He told Pemberton the 2 C's would look well in advertising. And so, taking his pen, he wrote in the elegant Spencerian script used by accountants of the time, the 2 words that are today more recognizable than the Christian cross in many parts of the world: Coca-Cola. However, the beginning was a financial disaster. In that first year, they sold an average of just 9 drinks a day. Total revenue was $50. Expenses, $70. The company was born in the red. Pemberton died just 2 years later in poverty, desperately selling parts of his company to survive, unaware that he had invented the most successful consumer product in human history. With Pemberton out of the picture, enter Asa Candler. If Pemberton was the dreaming inventor, Candler was the capitalist shark. He bought the entire formula for about $2,300. The first thing he did was not change the recipe, but change consumer psychology. Candler invented one of the most powerful marketing tools in history, the coupon. He gave away thousands of tickets for a free glass. He knew the first sip was an investment. The second sip would pay dividends forever. The strategy worked so well that by 1895, just 3 years after founding the company, Coca-Cola was in every state of the Union. But even geniuses make mistakes, and Candler made a $1 billion one. In 1899, 2 lawyers from Tennessee pitched him a radical idea: put the drink in bottles so people could take it home. Candler, convinced that elegant people only drank at soda fountains, sold them the exclusive rights to bottle Coca-Cola across the entire United States for $1. Yes, a single dollar bill, which, legend has it, he never even collected. This contract created the Coca-Cola system. The parent company makes the syrup, and local partners bottle it. This allowed explosive expansion, but brought a serious problem: imitation. Suddenly, the market was flooded with copies: Coca-Nola, Toca-Cola, Ma Coca-Co. They all used identical straight bottles. If the label fell off in the ice, you didn't know what you were drinking. The company needed a package that was impossible to copy. In 1915, they issued a challenge to America's glass makers with instructions that sound like something out of a spy novel. Design a bottle so distinctive that it could be recognized by touch in the dark or even if lying broken on the ground. The Root Glass Company of Indiana accepted the challenge. Their team went to the library for inspiration from the ingredients. They wanted to mimic the shape of the coca leaf or cola nut, but they messed up. In the dictionary, they found an illustration of a cocoa pod, cocoa, which has nothing to do with the formula. But they liked the shape. They copied its ribs and curved silhouette. That botanical error gave birth to the contour bottle patented in 1915. The perfect wrapper was born, and with it, the most famous silhouette of the 20th century. We arrive at 1923. Enter Robert Woodruff, the man who would steer the company for 60 years. If Candler was the merchant, Woodruff was the general. His vision wasn't to sell a soda, but to put a Coca-Cola within an arm's reach of desire of every human on Earth. But his greatest test came with World War II. Sugar was rationed. Civilian production halted. Woodruff, in a masterstroke of geopolitical chess, issued an order bordering on logistical madness. See that every man in uniform gets a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents, wherever he is, and whatever it costs the company. It wasn't just charity. It was the most aggressive marketing campaign in history. Coca-Cola convinced the U.S. government that its drink was essential for troop morale. They were exempted from rationing. Demand was such that in 1943, General Dwight Eisenhower sent an urgent telegram from North Africa. He didn't ask for bullets. He asked for 3 million bottles of Coca-Cola and, most incredibly, the complete equipment to build 10 bottling factories behind the front lines. Coca-Cola sent its own employees to war. They were called technical observers. They wore military uniforms, held officer rank, and were known as the Coca-Cola Colonels. These men built 64 bottling plants in the middle of the war, from the jungles of the Pacific to the ruins of Europe. American soldiers consumed over 5 billion bottles during the conflict. But the brilliance happened afterward. When the war ended and soldiers went home, the factories stayed. Coca-Cola's global infrastructure had been built and paid for by the United States Army. The brand had colonized the world on the back of Sherman tanks. We jump to 1975. The empire faces a real threat. Pepsi launches the Pepsi Challenge, blind tests in malls where people consistently chose the cup of Pepsi over Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola executives panicked. Their own research confirmed the data. People preferred Pepsi's sweeter taste. What they didn't know was that the test was biased. In a single sip, the human brain prefers sugar, but in a whole can, that sweetness cloys. Coca-Cola had the perfect product for the long haul, but was losing on first impressions. In 1985, under Roberto Goizueta, they made the riskiest decision in modern business history: change the secret formula. The project was codenamed Kansas. Scientists created a new mix, sweeter, smoother. They tested it with 200,000 people. The data was irrefutable. New Coke won. On April 23, 1985, at Lincoln Center in New York, Goizueta announced the death of the 99-year-old formula. He told the press, "The best has been made even better." What followed wasn't a product launch. It was national mourning. The company forgot it wasn't selling carbonated water. It was selling memories. People felt their childhood had been stolen. Protest groups formed. The company hotline collapsed with 1,500 hate calls a day. In Havana, Fidel Castro toasted with old Coca-Cola, calling the change a symptom of capitalist decay. It was 79 days of corporate hell. Finally, the company surrendered. Interrupting national TV programming, They announced the return of the original formula as Coca-Cola Classic. Sales exploded. People fell in love all over again with the brand they thought they'd lost. Ironically, the biggest marketing mistake in history saved the company and crushed Pepsi forever. Today, in 2025, Coca-Cola is no longer just a soda. It is a financial hydra. They learned the lesson. Never touch the original formula, just buy the competition. They have transformed into a total beverage company. They've spent billions buying Costa Coffee to fight Starbucks, Body Armor to dominate sports drinks, and they control a huge chunk of Monster Energy. If you drink something liquid that isn't alcohol, and sometimes even alcohol, it's likely your money ends up in Atlanta. Financially, they are a perfect machine. In 2024, their pricing strategies are surgical. They introduced mini cans not just for health, but for economics. They sell you less liquid at a much higher price per liter, keeping the product accessible while skyrocketing profit margins. But the giant faces a threat it cannot buy or sue: its own trash. Coca-Cola produces billions of plastic bottles a year. For 6 years running, it has been named the world's worst plastic polluting company. Despite promises of a world without waste and goals to use reusable packaging, 2024 data shows that virgin plastic use continues to rise and reuse targets are stagnant. Coca-Cola is today a paradox. It is the most loved brand and, simultaneously, one of the most ecologically questioned. They have survived wars, crises, and their own mistakes. But the question for the 21st century is, can the symbol of happiness survive on a planet running out of space for its bottles?